The silver locket spattered with blood hung from Gwen Deveraux's trembling fingers as the sheriff pushed her toward the jailhouse. The whispers of the townspeople cutting deeper than any knife could. Murder was a hanging offense in Cottonwood Springs, and all evidence pointed to her as the killer of the town's most prominent citizen. Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, 1878. The town had sprung up around silver mines and cattle, attracting those seeking fortune and those fleeing their past. Gwen Deveraux had arrived 6 months prior, opening a small millinery shop with money saved from years of work back east. At 26, she'd hoped for a fresh start after losing her parents and escaping an unwanted engagement. Her quick smile and fashionable hats had won over many of the town's ladies, but her independence had raised eyebrows among the more traditional folk. "I didn't kill him," Gwen insisted as Sheriff Tate roughly guided her into the cell. "Mr. Lancaster was alive when I left him." "Save it for the judge," Sheriff Tate grunted, slamming the iron door shut. Woman found standing over a dead body, covered in blood, holding the murder weapon. Don't take much figuring. The cell was small and dank, with a thin straw mattress on a metal frame and a bucket in the corner. Gwen sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation settling over her like a suffocating blanket. Just hours ago, she had been delivering a special order hat to Randall Lancaster at his grand house on the hill. Now she was accused of plunging a letter opener into his chest. "You get one night to confess," the sheriff called over his shoulder as he settled at his desk. "Judge Crawford rides in tomorrow. He ain't fond of trials for obvious guilt." Gwen wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back tears. She had no family here, few friends close enough to stand by her in such circumstances. The blood on her hands and dress had come from trying to help Lancaster after finding him gasping his last breaths. The letter opener had been in his chest when she arrived. She'd foolishly pulled it out, thinking to save him. As night fell, lantern light cast eerie shadows across the jailhouse walls. Gwen could hear the sounds of the saloon down the street, piano music, raucous laughter, life continuing while hers hung in the balance. She closed her eyes, trying to make sense of what had happened. Lancaster had sent a note requesting she deliver his wife's birthday gift personally. When she'd arrived, the door had been ajar. She'd called out, then heard a groan from the study. A sharp noise outside the window startled her. Gwen looked up to see a dark silhouette against the small barred window. Her heart raced until a low voice spoke. "Madam, you awake in there?" Gwen approached cautiously. "Who's there?" "Name's Yates Calloway. Just rode into town. Heard some talk that don't sit right with me." The moonlight revealed a man with a weathered face partially hidden beneath the brim of a dusty hat. His eyes were sharp and assessing, but not unkind. "Why would you care about my troubles, Mr. Calloway? You don't know me?" Gwen whispered, conscious of the sheriff snoring at his desk. "Known plenty of men who've killed. They've got a certain look. You don't have it." He shifted, the leather of his gun belt creaking. Something else too overheard. Lancaster's housekeeper at the saloon said she saw a shadow leaving through the garden right before you arrived. Nobody's bothering to listen to her. Hope flared in Gwen's chest. There was someone else there. The room was disturbed when I arrived, papers scattered, a chair overturned. "Sheriff planning to hang you without proper investigation?" "Judge arrives tomorrow. Sheriff says he doesn't waste time on obvious cases." Calloway's jaw tightened. "That ain't justice. Sit tight, Mississippi." "Deveraux. Gwen Deveraux. Miss Deveraux." Dawn comes. Things might look different. Before she could ask what he meant, he disappeared from the window. Gwen returned to her cot, a small spark of hope kindling where only despair had lived moments before. True to his word, Yates Calloway returned at first light. Not to her window, but through the front door of the jailhouse. Sheriff Tate looked up from his coffee with annoyance. "Help you, stranger?" "Yates Calloway." He placed a folded telegram on the sheriff's desk. "Came in last night from Tucson. Marshal Jenkins asked me to deliver it personal." The sheriff's scowl deepened as he read. "This can't be right. Murder of a prominent businessman in Tucson 3 weeks back. Same method as your victim. Letter opener to the heart." Gwen pressed against the bars, straining to hear. "Could be coincidence," the sheriff argued. "Could be. Except the Tucson killer left this behind." Calloway produced a small object wrapped in cloth. Unwrapping it revealed a silver button with an unusual design. "Found anything like that here?" Sheriff Tate's expression wavered. "We ain't searched thorough yet. Lancaster only died yesterday. Might want to look before you hang an innocent woman." Calloway's voice was casual, but carried an edge of steel. "Marshall's asking for cooperation. Seems our killer's been working his way north. 3 victims now, all wealthy men, all stabbed same way." The sheriff rubbed his jaw, clearly uncomfortable with this development. "Judge Crawford won't be pleased with a delay. Judge Crawford won't be pleased if you hang the wrong person while a killer keeps working his trade, either." Tate finally nodded. "We'll hold off on any decisions till we investigate proper. But she stays in the cell." Calloway tipped his hat. "Fair enough." He glanced at Gwen, giving her the slightest nod before turning to leave. "Wait," called the sheriff. "You staying in town? Got a room at the Western Star Hotel. I'll help with the investigation if you want. Tracked men before." "We'll see," the sheriff replied non-committally. After Calloway left, Gwen sank back onto her cot, relief and confusion mingling. The telegram had bought her time, but what had Calloway really seen in Tucson? Was there truly a killer moving from town to town? Or had the cowboy fabricated the evidence to help her? And if so, why would a stranger risk so much? The next few days brought unexpected activity to Cottonwood Springs. Sheriff Tate, reluctant but compelled by the possible connection to other murders, began a more thorough investigation. Judge Crawford arrived and was displeased with the delay but agreed to postpone any trial until more evidence could be gathered. Gwen remained in her cell, but conditions improved slightly. Mrs. Hollister, the widow who owned the boarding house where Gwen rented a room, brought clean clothes and decent meals. Several of Gwen's customers visited, though most of the town still believed her guilty. Yates Calloway became a common sight at the sheriff's office, offering assistance that Tate grudgingly accepted. Through snippets of conversation, Gwen learned that Calloway had been a scout for the army, then a bounty hunter of sorts who tracked men across territory lines. His skills were proving useful as they re-examined the Lancaster murder. On the 4th day, Calloway approached her cell while the sheriff was out. "Found something interesting," he said quietly. "Garden beneath Lancaster's study window had boot prints. Too large to be yours." Gwen gripped the bars. "I told them I heard something when I arrived, like someone leaving in a hurry. Problem is, ground's been trampled since by curious folk. Hard to make a solid case." His eyes held steady on hers. "Tell me exactly what happened when you arrived." Gwen recounted the events again: the open door, the sounds she'd heard, finding Lancaster dying on the floor. "He tried to say something," she added, "just before he died. Sounded like shadow or shallow. I couldn't tell." Calloway's expression sharpened. "Shadow, you say? Perhaps. Does it mean something to you?" "Maybe." He glanced toward the door, then back at her. Lancaster wasn't just any businessman. He had government contracts, mining interests, made enemies. "You knew of him before?" "Knew of him. Never met him." Calloway lowered his voice further. "There's talk of someone called the Shadow who works as a hired killer for wealthy men with problems they want solved quietly. Always the same method: blade to the heart, quick and clean. You think this?" Shadow killed Mr. Lancaster? Why? That's what I aim to find out. He straightened as footsteps approached. Stay strong, Miss Deveraux. Truth has a way of coming to light. Sheriff Tate entered with Deputy Wilson, cutting their conversation short. But that night, lying on her cot, Gwen replayed Calloway's words. The Shadow, a professional killer, and Lancaster's dying word might have been identifying his murderer. For the first time, she considered that her situation might be even more dangerous than it appeared. If such a killer existed and learned that she might have heard Lancaster identify him, would he come after her next? The next morning brought unexpected news. Mrs. Lancaster, the widow, had requested to see her. Gwen was startled. Victoria Lancaster was known to be fragile and reclusive, rarely seen in town even before her husband's murder. Mrs. Lancaster arrived veiled in black, her slender form seeming to shrink beneath the heavy mourning clothes. Sheriff Tate offered his office for privacy, though he insisted on staying within earshot. Miss Deveraux, Mrs. Lancaster began once they were seated, her voice surprisingly steady. I needed to see you myself. Mrs. Lancaster, please accept my condolences. I swear to you, I did not kill your husband. I believe you. The widow raised her veil, revealing a pale face with delicate features and tired eyes. Randall spoke highly of your character. He said you reminded him of our daughter we lost years ago, forthright and determined. Gwen hadn't known about a daughter. Thank you for your faith in me, but I don't understand. Randall was afraid in the weeks before his death. Mrs. Lancaster glanced toward the sheriff, then lowered her voice. He received threatening notes. He wouldn't show me, but I found one he missed burning. It said only, "The shadow comes for those who betray." A chill ran down Gwen's spine. Did you tell the sheriff? Randall made me promise not to involve authorities. He said it would only make things worse. She reached into her reticule and withdrew a small object. But I found this in the garden beneath his study window the day after his death. She pressed it into Gwen's palm, a silver button with an intricate design of interlocking circles. Like the one Mr. Calloway showed the sheriff, Gwen whispered. I've been too afraid to come forward. But seeing you imprisoned for something you didn't do. Mrs. Lancaster shook her head. Randall would want justice, not an innocent woman punished. Mrs. Lancaster, you must tell Sheriff Tate about the threatening notes and give him this button. The widow hesitated. The men my husband dealt with are powerful. If they sent this shadow, they might come for you next, Gwen finished grimly. All the more reason to let the law handle this. After a moment's consideration, Mrs. Lancaster nodded. She called the sheriff over and reluctantly shared what she told Gwen, presenting the silver button as evidence. Sheriff Tate frowned deeply. Why didn't you mention this sooner, Mrs. Lancaster? Fear, Sheriff. The same reason many truths stay hidden. She rose shakily. Please use this information wisely. And please, protect Miss Deveraux. She's an innocent in all this. After the widow left, Sheriff Tate studied the button, comparing it to the one Calloway had brought. They were identical. This changes things, he admitted grudgingly to Gwen. But you're still not free to go. Too many unanswered questions. I understand. But Sheriff, if this shadow person realizes Mrs. Lancaster has spoken to you, I'll send Deputy Wilson to keep watch at her house. He pocketed both buttons. And I need to find Calloway. He knows more than he's saying. But Yates Calloway didn't appear at the sheriff's office that day. By evening, Gwen grew worried. Had something happened to him? Or had he simply moved on, having done what he could to delay her hanging? Near midnight, when the sheriff had stepped out and only the young deputy remained on duty, a soft scratching came at her window. Gwen approached cautiously to find Calloway's familiar silhouette. Been investigating, he whispered. Lancaster was involved in some shady business with the silver mines. Claim jumping, threatening small miners to sell cheap. That doesn't seem reason enough for murder, Gwen replied. There's more. Found papers in his office safe. Sheriff didn't think to look there. Lancaster was keeping records, maybe for blackmail. Names, dates, amounts paid for special services. The shadow? Looks that way. But Lancaster may have gotten greedy, threatened to expose someone who then sent the shadow after him. So the killer might be someone Lancaster knew, someone from town, not the shadow himself. He's brought in special. But whoever hired him could be anyone with money and secrets. Footsteps approached outside. Deputies coming back, Gwen warned. Tomorrow. Be ready. Calloway disappeared just as the jailhouse door opened. The deputy peered suspiciously at Gwen. Talking to someone, Miss Deveraux? Just praying, deputy, she answered, settling back on her cot. A woman in my position needs all the heavenly help she can get. The next day brought chaos to Cottonwood Springs. It began with shouts and running feet past the jailhouse, drawing both sheriff and deputy outside. Gunshots followed, then the terrible sound of a woman screaming. Stay put, Sheriff Tate ordered Gwen as he grabbed his rifle and rushed out. Minutes later, the deputy returned, face ashen. Mrs. Lancaster's been shot. Died instantly. Shooter fired from the ridge behind her house. No! Gwen gripped the bars. Did anyone see who did it? Some say they spotted a rider leaving town fast afterward. Sheriff's gathering men to pursue. He nervously checked his pistol. I'm to stay here with you. Gwen sank onto her cot, horrified. Mrs. Lancaster had been killed for coming forward for trying to help her. The shadow was eliminating loose ends, which meant Gwen herself was surely marked for death as well. The day crawled by with no news of the posse's success. As night fell, Deputy Wilson grew increasingly anxious, jumping at every sound. When a crash came from the back of the building, he drew his gun. Who's there? He called, moving cautiously toward the rear door. Another crash answered him. The deputy glanced at Gwen, clearly torn between investigating and staying to guard her. I should check that, he muttered. Be careful, Gwen urged, genuinely concerned for the young man. The moment he disappeared into the back room, the front door burst open. Yates Calloway entered swiftly, keys in hand. We need to leave now, he said, unlocking her cell. Mrs. Lancaster, I heard. They killed her because she helped me. And they'll kill you too if they get the chance. He handed her a bundle of clothing. Put these on quick. We need to make you less recognizable. The bundle contained men's clothing, a shirt, trousers, and a hat. Gwen hesitated only briefly before ducking behind the cell's privacy screen to change. Propriety seemed a small concern when her life was at stake. What about the deputy? She asked as she emerged, tucking her hair up into the hat. Distraction out back will keep him busy a few minutes. He'll be fine. They slipped out into the night, keeping to shadows as they made their way to the livery stable. Calloway had 2 horses saddled and waiting. Where are we going? Gwen asked as they mounted. Somewhere safe to figure this out. Can't leave town, that makes you look guilty for sure. But can't stay in jail waiting for the shadow to find a way to silence you. They rode out the back way, avoiding the main street, and headed toward the hills east of town. Gwen followed Calloway's lead, grateful for the riding lessons her father had insisted upon years ago, though riding astride in trousers was a new experience. After an hour's ride, they reached a small cabin tucked into a stand of pine trees. Old line shack, Calloway explained. Used it when I was tracking a fugitive through here last year. Nobody uses it now. The cabin was simple, 1 room with a small fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow bed. Calloway lit a lantern, then set about starting a fire while Gwen took in their sanctuary. The sheriff will think I escaped, that I truly am guilty. Sheriff's smarter than that. He'll figure I helped you, especially after what happened to Mrs. Lancaster. Calloway straightened from the now crackling fire. But we don't have much time. Day or two at most before they find us here. So what's our plan? Find the real killer, the shadow. That's part of it. He pulled a folded paper from his vest. Found this in Lancaster's papers. It's a list of payments, dates, and initials. 3 sets TM, JB, and HS. Gwen studied the paper. These amounts are substantial. Blood money usually is. Question is, who do these initials belong to? Who in Cottonwood Springs has reason to want Lancaster dead? They spent hours reviewing what they knew. Lancaster had been involved in forcing smaller mining operations to sell out. He had government contracts that some found suspicious. He kept records that might have been used for blackmail. Wait, Gwen said suddenly. TM, could that be Thomas Mercer? He owns the bank and several business properties. And JB might be Judge Benjamin Crawford. He goes by his middle name, but his first name is Joshua. The same judge who was ready to convict me without a trial? Gwen's eyes widened. And HS. Harold Simmons, the mayor. Calloway nodded slowly. 3 of the most powerful men in the territory. If Lancaster was blackmailing them, any one of them might have hired this shadow to eliminate the threat. Gwen finished. But how do we prove it? We can't just accuse the mayor, a judge, and the town's banker of conspiracy to murder. We need evidence. And we need to identify the shadow himself. Calloway moved to the window, scanning the darkness outside. These kinds of killers leave town after the job's done. But with you still alive and the investigation continuing, he might have stayed. A stranger in town, then? But you're a stranger too. How would we know which one? Shadow's professional. He'll blend in, take a respectable cover. Calloway turned back to her. Someone who arrived shortly before Lancaster's murder. Someone who had access to Lancaster's house. Someone who a twig snapped outside the cabin. Instantly, Calloway extinguished the lantern and drew his pistol. Get down, he whispered, pulling Gwen away from the window. They crouched in darkness, listening to the soft crunch of footsteps approaching the cabin. Calloway positioned himself between Gwen and the door, his body tense and ready. The door creaked open. A shadowy figure stood silhouetted against the night sky. I know you're in here, Miss Deveraux, called a familiar voice. Sheriff sent me to find you. Deputy Wilson? Gwen stood cautiously. Step out where we can see you clearly, Calloway ordered, gun still raised. The young deputy entered, hands visible. Sheriff figured you'd head this way, Mr. Calloway. Said you used this cabin before. How convenient that he remembered, Calloway replied, suspicion evident in his voice. And he sent you alone? Posse's still out searching for Mrs. Lancaster's killer. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff wants Miss Deveraux back in protective custody. Says it's not safe for her out here. It's not safe for her in jail either. Someone murdered a witness who tried to help her. That's why the sheriff wants to move her to the county seat. Marshal's office there has better security. Deputy Wilson extended a hand toward Gwen. Please, miss. Sheriff gave his word you'll be treated fairly. Gwen hesitated, looking to Calloway. Something didn't feel right. The deputy's manner was too insistent. His story too convenient. When did you join the Cottonwood Springs law, deputy? Calloway asked casually, though his gun remained steady. 6 weeks back. Why? Just curious. Before that, worked security for the mining companies down Tucson way. The deputy's hand drifted toward his holster. Now, are you coming peacefully, or do I need to? His sentence ended abruptly as Calloway lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The deputy's hidden derringer clattered across the floor as they struggled. "Gwen, the gun!" Calloway shouted. She scrambled for the small weapon, grasping it just as Deputy Wilson landed a solid blow to Calloway's jaw. The men rolled across the cabin floor, each fighting for dominance. "He's the shadow," Calloway grunted, blocking another punch. "Check his boot's silver buttons." Gwen circled the struggling men, derringer trained on the deputy. When Wilson's leg extended during the fight, she saw the distinctive silver button on his boot, identical to the ones found at the murder scenes. "Stop or I'll shoot," she commanded, summoning all her courage to keep her voice steady. The men froze, Wilson on top with his hands around Calloway's throat. Seeing the derringer pointed at him, the deputy slowly released his grip. "You're making a mistake," Wilson said, eyes cold and calculating. "I'm an officer of the law. You're a killer who infiltrated the sheriff's office to keep track of the investigation," Calloway countered, shoving the man off him and quickly binding his wrists with a leather strap. "You murdered Lancaster when he threatened to expose whoever hired you. Then you killed Mrs. Lancaster when she came forward with evidence." Wilson's face transformed, the youthful deputy persona falling away to reveal something harder, more dangerous. "You can't prove anything. The buttons are proof enough to start," Calloway said, examining the man's boot. "And I'd wager if we compare your handwriting to those threatening notes Lancaster received, we'll find a match." "Who hired you?" Gwen demanded. "Was it Mercer, Crawford, or Simmons?" A cold smile crossed Wilson's face. "You think I'd tell you that? Whoever talks too much in my profession doesn't live long." "You're not in a position to withhold information," Calloway said, checking Wilson's bonds. "Sheriff Tate might be more persuasive than we are." "Sheriff Tate?" Wilson laughed. "You think he's coming to rescue you?" "He's the one who sent me to silence both of you." Gwen and Calloway exchanged alarmed glances. If the sheriff was involved. "We need to leave," Calloway decided, pulling Wilson to his feet. "Now." They secured the prisoner on his own horse, tied so he couldn't escape or control the animal. With Calloway leading Wilson's mount, they set off into the night, avoiding the main trails. "Where are we going?" Gwen asked as they rode. "There's a telegraph office at Cooper Station, 15 miles east. From there, we can contact the federal marshal directly." Wilson remained silent but watchful, his eyes calculating as if waiting for an opportunity. Gwen kept the derringer ready, unwilling to underestimate him again. They rode through the night, the terrain growing rougher as they climbed into the hills. Near dawn, they stopped briefly to rest the horses and drink from a small stream. "How did you know?" Gwen asked Calloway as they filled their canteens. "About him being the shadow?" Little things added up. He appeared in town shortly before Lancaster's murder. His story about working security in Tucson matched the timing of the murder there. And he was too eager to find you after you escaped. Calloway glanced at their prisoner. "Plus, he knew exactly where this cabin was without me telling him." "You're cleverer than you look, cowboy," Wilson remarked coldly. "Won't save you, though. By now, the sheriff knows you've taken me. He'll have men watching all approaches to Cooper Station. Then we'll find another way to contact the marshal," Calloway replied evenly. They continued riding as the sun rose, taking a roundabout path to avoid being spotted. By mid-morning, they could see Cooper Station in the distance, a small settlement consisting of a trading post, stables, and the all-important telegraph office. "We'll approach from the south," Calloway decided, "less visible from the main road." As they circled wide around the station, Gwen noticed dust rising to the north riders approaching fast. "Someone's coming," she warned. Calloway spotted them too. 5, maybe 6 men. Could be a regular traveler group, but we can't take chances. This way. He led them into a rocky draw that provided some cover. They dismounted, securing Wilson to a stunted pine tree, and crept to a vantage point where they could observe the approaching riders. Through Calloway's field glass, Gwen could make out Sheriff Tate at the head of the group. With him rode Thomas Mercer, Judge Crawford, and 2 men she didn't recognize. All the conspirators together, she whispered. If we could get them to reveal their plot somehow. They won't confess easily, Calloway said grimly. Men like that protect each other. But they might turn on each other to save themselves. Gwen's mind raced. What if they thought Wilson had talked? That he'd revealed which one of them hired him? Calloway considered this. Create division among them. Could work, but risky. Everything about this is risky. I'm facing the gallows if we fail. After discussing briefly, they formed a desperate plan. They would use Wilson himself as bait, making the conspirators believe their hired killer had betrayed them. Returning to their prisoner, Calloway explained bluntly, "Your employers are coming to clean up their mess, including you. Professional killers are disposable once they become a liability." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "They need me. Do they? Seems to me you're the only one who can connect them to Lancaster's murder. Convenient for them if you disappear now." The killer's expression revealed a flicker of doubt. Self-preservation was a powerful motivator, even for professional assassins. "Help us bring them to justice," Gwen urged. "Testify about who hired you, and the federal marshal might show leniency." Wilson remained silent, but his calculating gaze suggested he was weighing his options. They positioned themselves carefully. Calloway would intercept the riders while Gwen remained hidden with Wilson, the Derringer ensuring his cooperation. If things went wrong, she was to flee with the evidence they'd gathered from Lancaster's office. Calloway rode out boldly to meet the approaching group, intercepting them before they reached Cooper Station. From her hiding place, Gwen could see but not hear the exchange. Sheriff Tate appeared angered by Calloway's appearance, while the others seemed tense. Calloway was gesturing back toward the rocky draw, clearly baiting them to follow. The men conferred briefly, then followed Calloway toward the hiding place. Gwen tensed, hands steady on the Derringer. Everything depended on the next few minutes. When they were close enough, Gwen called out, "That's far enough, gentlemen." The riders halted, startled by her voice. Sheriff Tate squinted up at the rocks. "Miss Deveraux? You're making things worse for yourself. Come out and surrender." "I think not, Sheriff. Not when I now know you were involved in Lancaster's murder." "That's absurd," blustered Judge Crawford. "We're here to uphold the law. Is that why you hired Wilson to kill Lancaster? Because he was blackmailing you?" Gwen remained hidden as she spoke. "Or was it Mayor Simmons's idea? Or perhaps Mr. Mercer's?" The men exchanged alarmed glances. "What nonsense is this?" Mercer demanded, though his voice lacked conviction. "Your hired killer has been quite informative," Calloway added, playing his part. "Told us exactly which one of you paid him to eliminate Lancaster. And Mrs. Lancaster, too, when she became inconvenient." Wilson would never. Sheriff Tate began, then stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. "Interesting that you know who we're talking about, Sheriff," Calloway observed coolly. "When we never mentioned Deputy Wilson by name." The group fell silent, the tension palpable. Then Judge Crawford turned on Mercer. "I told you hiring an outsider was too risky. Should have handled Lancaster ourselves. And have the murder traced directly back to us?" Mercer retorted. "Your brilliant legal mind didn't have any better ideas at the time. The dam had broken. Accusations flew between the conspirators, each trying to distance himself from the plot while implicating the others. Sheriff Tate, seeing his Confederates crumbling, made a desperate move. He drew his gun and fired toward Calloway, who dove for cover. The other men scattered, some drawing weapons while others sought protection. Gwen aimed carefully and fired the Derringer, the shot striking Sheriff Tate's arm. He dropped his gun with a howl of pain. "The next shot won't be a warning," she called out. "Throw down your weapons." Calloway had recovered his own pistol and now stood with it trained on the group. "Do as she says. It's over, gentlemen." Faced with determined opposition and their own dissolving alliance, the men reluctantly disarmed. Only Judge Crawford attempted to flee, spurring his horse toward the station. He didn't get far before a shot from behind the rocks dropped him from his saddle with a wound to his leg. Wilson stepped into view, holding Gwen's rifle. "Insurance policy," he explained with a cold smile. "I'll testify against them in exchange for consideration of my case." "That's not your rifle," Calloway said, surprised. "No. She slipped it to me while you were talking to them." "Smart woman." Wilson kept the rifle trained on the wounded judge. "I recognize a sinking ship when I see one. These men would have eliminated me as soon as I'd served my purpose." With the conspirators disarmed and 2 of them wounded, Calloway and Gwen herded the group to Cooper Station. The telegraph operator, initially alarmed by the armed standoff, was persuaded to send an urgent message to the federal marshal in Tucson. "It'll be a day before the marshal can get men here," the operator warned. "We'll manage," Calloway assured him. The trading post had a small storeroom that would serve as a temporary jail. That night, with their prisoners secured and Wilson cooperating in hopes of a reduced sentence, Gwen and Calloway finally had a moment alone on the trading post's porch. "Hard to believe it's over," Gwen said softly, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Justice sometimes takes winding paths," Calloway replied, "but it usually finds its way eventually. Why did you help me? From the beginning, when you came to my cell window, you were a stranger to me." Calloway was silent for a long moment. "I was in Tucson when the businessman there was murdered. Started tracking the killer, suspecting he might strike again. When I heard about Lancaster's murder and a woman being railroaded for it, the pattern seemed clear. So it was justice you were after, at first." He turned to face her, his expression softening in the lantern light. "But then I met you. Your courage, your determination despite everything. I couldn't let them hang an innocent woman, especially not one like you." Gwen felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the mild spring night. "I owe you my life, Mr. Calloway." "Yates," he corrected gently. "And you don't owe me anything. In fact, I should thank you. Been drifting a long time, moving from job to job. This is the first time in years I've felt like what I'm doing truly matters." Their eyes held, a connection forming that transcended their brief acquaintance. In those few intense days, they had come to trust each other with their lives, a foundation stronger than many relationships built over years. "What will you do now?" Gwen asked. "After the marshal takes the prisoners." "Hadn't thought that far ahead." He hesitated. "What about you? Will you stay in Cottonwood Springs?" "I'm not sure I can. Too many bad memories now. Could be the town will see you differently. The woman who exposed corruption and brought murderers to justice. Perhaps," she smiled wryly, "or perhaps I'll always be the milliner who was almost hanged for murder." The federal marshal arrived the following afternoon with 4 deputies. After hearing the full story and examining the evidence, he took formal custody of the prisoners. "The territory owes you both a debt of gratitude," Marshal Jenkins told Gwen and Calloway. "This conspiracy went deeper than we realized. Lancaster was blackmailing these men over illegal land deals and government contract fraud that spans 3 territories. Will Wilson receive the consideration he was promised?" Gwen asked, surprising herself with concern for the assassin who had nearly killed her. Some. His testimony will be valuable in dismantling the entire operation. The marshal adjusted his hat. As for you, Miss Deveraux, consider yourself officially cleared of all charges. I'll ensure the territorial newspapers publish the truth about this case. As the marshal's party departed with their prisoners, the residents of Cooper's Station gathered to hear the full story. News would spread quickly across the territory, the wrongfully accused milliner and the cowboy who had uncovered the truth. That evening, Gwen and Calloway sat together by a campfire outside the trading post. They had accepted the owner's invitation to stay as honored guests while they decided their next steps. "I've been thinking," Calloway said, watching the flames dance. "Marshal Jenkins offered me a deputy position. Said he could use someone with my tracking skills and determination." "That sounds like a fine opportunity," Gwen replied, trying to ignore the twinge of disappointment at the thought of him leaving. "It would mean settling in Tucson." He paused, then added carefully, "I hear they need good milliners there. Growing town. Lots of ladies wanting fashionable hats." Gwen looked up, meeting his gaze across the fire. "Are you suggesting I come to Tucson?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps we both found something worth holding on to during this ordeal." His voice was gentle but earnest. "I've never met anyone like you, Gwen Deveraux. Your courage, your quick thinking, you saved both our lives back there." "We saved each other," she corrected softly. "We did. And maybe we could continue doing that." He reached across and took her hand. "I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but I know what's valuable when I find it." Gwen felt tears welling in her eyes. "I've learned to be cautious about new beginnings, as have I, but some risks are worth taking." His fingers tightened around hers. "I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance to see where this road might lead." Under the vast Arizona sky, with the fire casting golden light on their faces, Gwen made her decision. "I think Tucson could use a good millinery shop. And I've always believed that the best adventures come from the most unexpected beginnings." Calloway's smile was worth every hardship she had endured. To new beginnings, then. 6 months later, Tucson was buzzing with excitement over the upcoming wedding of Deputy Marshal Yates Calloway and Miss Gwen Deveraux, whose Cottonwood affair had become something of a legend throughout the territory. Her millinery shop, New Beginnings, had quickly become popular with Tucson's ladies, while Calloway had established himself as one of Marshal Jenkins's most valued deputies. The trial of Thomas Mercer, Judge Crawford, and their conspirators had concluded with convictions all around. Wilson, true to his bargain, had provided testimony that exposed not only the Lancaster murder but a web of corruption spanning years. His own sentence had been reduced, though he would still spend many years behind bars. On their wedding day, Gwen wore a dress of ivory silk with a hat of her own creation, adorned with a single silver button that Calloway had given her as a reminder of their unusual beginning. "From shadow to light," he whispered as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "That's the journey we've made together. And we'll continue to make," Gwen replied, her heart full. "For every shadow we face, we'll find the light together." As they built their life in Tucson, the story of the woman wrongfully accused and the cowboy who found the true killer became part of frontier lore. But for Gwen and Yates, the real story was the one they were writing each day, of love born in danger, trust forged in adversity, and a bond that had proven stronger than the shadows that had once threatened to engulf them. Their home on the edge of Tucson became known for its warm hospitality and open door. Yates continued his work with the marshal's office, his reputation for justice and fairness growing throughout the territory. Gwen's shop flourished, and she began teaching young women the millinery trade, offering opportunities to those who, like herself, sought new beginnings. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed a daughter, Victoria, named in honor of Mrs. Lancaster, whose courage had helped set Gwen free. A son, Thomas, followed 2 years later. Their family grew against the backdrop of a changing West, as railroads connected distant territories and Arizona moved toward statehood. On quiet evenings, they would sometimes sit on their porch and recall the desperate days that had brought them together: the jailhouse window where they first spoke, the cabin where they confronted the shadow, the standoff at Cooper Station where truth finally prevailed. "I knew you were innocent from the moment I saw you," Yates would say, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "And I knew you were trustworthy from the moment you risked everything to help a stranger," Gwen would reply. From the darkest shadows had come their greatest light, a love story that began with murder but blossomed into a legacy of justice, compassion, and unwavering devotion that would endure long after the frontier days had passed into history.